what happens is testosterone increases reactive oxygen species production in mitochondria, and because it does several other things, like it activates something called NADPH oxidase. And anyway, the result is that it increases production of molecules like superoxide, which oftentimes get converted to hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is what's called a reactive oxygen species. So it's not a free radical, but it's an ROS. Okay, ROS, they're molecules, they want to steal electrons. All right, so the bottom line is, if these get too high, this can damage the cell, basically. So then why does testosterone increase this? Well, number one, because it increases efflux. It increases electron efflux through mitochondria, the electron transport chain. So actually, this is a byproduct of increasing energy production in certain cells, but also because this is a signaling molecule. So the way testosterone works is it not only does it cause you to produce, certain proteins and change the expression of certain genes like actin and myosin and skeletal muscle, but it also, by producing high amounts of ROS in what are called bursts, that's how it exerts its effect. Because what happens is, when testosterone levels rise sharply inside the cell, you get lots of this that causes, how to put it in layperson's terms, it activates certain proteins. Let's just say that. It activates proteins. What it really does is it modifies cysteine residues on protein phosphatases like MAP kinase and something called MAPK, ERK. And this, for example, in skeletal muscle increases, it prolongs signaling of things like mTOR, C1. Okay, and people kind of know from watching Huberman podcasts and shit like that, that increases muscle protein synthesis. So testosterone increases reactive oxygen species in part because it causes your mitochondria to produce more energy. And what happens is these things leak off as a result of that. But also because this has what are called second messenger effects. It's part of the testosterone signaling cascade. The problem is when this becomes way too high, it can damage the cell. I mean, it will damage the cell, because reactive oxygen species, they want to steal electrons. So they'll damage DNA, they'll damage components of the cell membrane. So it's a plus and minus thing that it does that. I mean, it's part of the effects of testosterone, but it's also it's not a good thing if it happens in an uncontrolled way. Let's put it to you like that. But it is necessary. Like I gave you the example in skeletal muscle. You have to have high amounts of ROS to activate mTOR, to increase muscle protein synthesis. In your blood vessels, or what are called endothelial cells, it's actually free radicals, ROS, that alter nitric oxide signaling. So when you have short bursts of ROS, it increases nitric oxide, causes vasodilation, okay? If you have uncontrolled ROS, it scavenges your nitric oxide, and that's what causes endothelial dysfunction. That's why you have bodybuilders, they drop dead of heart and blood vessel disease type of shit, largely because they have endothelial dysfunction. In the heart, same thing. In neurons, for example, testosterone's involved in regulating synaptic plasticity. And how does it do that? Well, it regulates calcium signaling. How does it do that? Well, you have something called voltage-gated calcium channels that also have, like I said, cysteine residues. I know that doesn't mean anything, but this can modify those, and basically it allows calcium entry into the neurons, okay? And that, in a very complex manner, regulates synaptic plasticity, okay? And like immune cells, like macrophages, all right? Free radicals also play a role in inflammatory pathway, gene transcription, stuff like that. The overall point is, yes, testosterone does increase reactive oxygen species production. It's a feature, it's not a bug. It can be a problem if it's unregulated or uncontrolled. And so the question is, how is it controlled? Well, it's controlled the way that all, reactive oxygen species are controlled in pretty much any cell. Antioxidant defenses. There's certain molecules, certain enzymes that produce certain molecules that neutralize reactive oxygen species. One of the most important, actually the most important antioxidant when it comes to testosterone is something called 17-beta estradiol. Now, when I pull up a picture of estradiol, I'll explain this because you'll never hear this anywhere else. I mean, you will never hear shit like this anywhere else on the internet. This is estradiol. Okay. So what happens is in certain cell types, particularly in fat cells, adipocytes, particularly in certain regions of the brain, you have an enzyme called aromatase. Now, contrary to what idiots on the internet tell you, your testosterone does not get converted to estradiol in the bloodstream. It gets converted to estradiol inside cells, specifically inside what's called the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, so it's a component inside the cell. Okay, involved in like lipid processing. So some testosterone gets converted to estradiol. All right. And what happens? Well, the aromatase enzyme, it turns the steroid or the androgen into it takes what's called the A ring and creates an aromatic ring. All right. It's basically this thing that you see right here with alternating double bonds. How do you dumb this down for people? This is so bad. This structure is very important. This is what tells you it's an antioxidant. Why? Because these alternating double bonds, like I just said, the reactive oxygen species, they want to steal electrons. So how do you neutralize them? You neutralize them with antioxidants. So estradiol at its third carbon on the aromatic ring can donate this hydrogen atom. That means it donates a proton and it donates an electron. And that's what actually neutralizes the free radical. So it takes the unpaired electron from the unstable molecule, okay? Now, what usually happens is that can cause a chain, if it's like a component of the cell membrane or it's like, certain proteins, that can lead to chain reaction oxidation because, it donates an electron, then it donates an electron, something. It causes like a cascade of damage. But when estradiol does it, it stabilizes the unpaired electron because it has an aromatic ring that, what the purpose of this is, it's something called resonance. It delocalizes the electrons across the ring. It's called molecular resonance. I don't know a good way to explain it, but it's a very good antioxidant for that purpose. Let's just put it that way. And so this is the reason why some of your testosterone gets converted into estradiol, because estradiol directly neutralizes the reactive oxygen species. Not only does it directly neutralize the reactive oxygen species, it also upregulates enzymes that produce other antioxidants, like glutathione synthase, okay? Yeah, estradiol upregulates glutathione synthase. That's very important. That's the reason why. That's essentially the reason why. So testosterone causes an oxidative burst And then what happens is some of the testosterone gets converted to estradiol. Estradiol dampens that signal, so to speak. This is the reason why, or this is one reason why you have in your skeletal muscle very low, very, very low expression of aromatase. Because, you don't really dampen the signal in this manner. So this is why testosterone is so anabolic in skeletal muscles, because there's no, it's hardly any conversion to estradiol. Whereas in the brain, you do dampen this signal. Okay, in fat cells, you do dampen this signal. And is that a good thing? Well, I just explained it's a good thing, because otherwise you get what's called oxidative stress. If you have this in your heart, you have aromatase in your heart, particularly in the upper chambers of the heart, or what's called the atriomyocardium. And that's very important, because if you take like aromatase inhibitors, or you take a bunch of synthetic androgens that are non-aromatizable or even partially non-aromatizable, well, that causes oxidative stress. That's what causes the heart failure. That's what causes the blood vessel damage. That's what causes the, eventual heart attack, stroke, etc. But that's really its purpose. I mean, that's one of its purposes. But estradiol obviously has other roles. I mean, it acts as what's called an endocrine hormone too, because it acts on like cells in the bone, for example, right? It increases cortical and trabecular bone density. So that would be considered an endocrine effect. But everything I just explained with free radicals, that's all like intracrine, paracrine signaling and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what it is.